I was talking to Andrew Bridgen the other day, the British MP, who's quite well known for his activities. He's been supporting Rainer Formick recently, but of course he was kicked out of the Tory party, and things have been tough for him. But he was telling the story of how far this goes back. So Tony Blair, this is what Andrew said to me. He said, "Why do you think Tony Blair took the death penalty off treason in 1998? And that's like 98. That's like almost 30 years ago. And that's just one example. But also here in New Zealand, legislation was changed well in advance to allow or create the framework for then what was deployed in some cases, the gap between what actually eventually happened and, foundations put in place, is a decade. So it's an intergenerational project. People got to, I think, always remember that if you're going through your set of filters to try and work out what you're seeing, it's build in there that the part of the structure of it, it's a feature, not an option. It's a feature, is to keep everybody disagreeing with everyone.
On at least something. Yeah, exactly right.
On at least something that of purpose that might separate you otherwise from having a closer relationship. And then if you think of that, the primary driver is to drive people apart. I think it comes down to almost a binary thing in the end. And I haven't been able to escape this, and that is good versus evil. And I think in the end, 80,000 foot view, even more, that's what you're looking at.
I'm your host, Farzin and Irani. Let's connect the dots. Welcome to Connecting the Dots. And today we have a very special guest called Paul Brennan. He's the host of a radio show in New Zealand called RCR, Reality Check Radio, which kicked off during the pandemic. And Paul and I know each other because he interviews me on a show called Money Talks in New Zealand on quite a regular basis. But he also interviews guests from around the world on different topics that are going to affect us all in the coming future. So it's a pleasure to have Paul Brennan on our show. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Farzin. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and hello to your audience. It's nice to connect with them.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure to have you on the show. If our audience has realized, for the first time, I'm wearing my branded cap, which is how it all started off, lions, not sheep. That's how I came across to RCR. So I'm wearing the cap for this conversation of ours. Hey, Paul, just for audience who might not know who you are, could you give us a brief background on your career and what got you up to this stage, mate?
Well, just a media guy from, started out about 43 years ago, mainly in radio, through the whole sort of range of radio, from music radio to talk radio to news radio to public service radio. But also along the way, I became a video editor, film cameraman, and producer of many TV commercials, too many in my mind. So I've come through the media, but Farzin, like yourself, because I know you, I've always been curious about things, no matter what. I want to know about things, and the older I've got, the more I want to know, and the more it doesn't make sense, the even more I want to know.
There you go, mate. And that's exactly why we got you on the show. We both have no shortage of curiosity. And when you're curious, you open up books or pages that sometimes you weren't expecting, and it leads you down a rabbit hole. But also, it's kind of nice to know those kind of things so you can share it with people who are unaware or asleep at the wheel. And the world we're going into, I think it's really important that people wake up to what is happening behind the scenes. So let's start with, you're based in New Zealand, my friend Paul. Let's start. I'll just leave you an open field. What do you think the next 2 to 5 years bring to our shores?
Well, we're certainly part of the Western world experiment, whatever that is. We're part of it. We're a bit of a, well, isolated, not so isolated, but, we're a long way away from where the real action is. So who knows where the real action is anywhere in the world anymore. We're definitely part of that Five Eyes Western world, excuse me, lockstep. Okay, so I think that's part of it. I think it was really interesting what COVID threw up for us. I don't know if New Zealand was any different again from those other like countries that I just mentioned, but I learned a lot about, well, I had confirmed, it's probably a better way of putting, because I always suspected there was something in the national psyche, but it showed me that that I wasn't so far out in thinking these things anymore, because I was looking at the behavior of people reacting to it, and I could see none of it made sense. And like I said before, the more it doesn't make sense, the more curious I get about it. And, you talk about rabbit holes, probably not a good term to use anymore. I don't know, maybe we can use it in reverse, because there are all sorts of rabbit holes. But you follow the direction of things, right? And sometimes you're cut off really early. There's nothing there. You realize that. You push further, and I suppose you've got to be smart enough to work out where you've overreached in what you're thinking, and been too conspiratorial or too suspicious, or it's a nuanced thing. I think a lot of people are working those things out. So so I don't mind going down rabbit holes, actually. In fact, someone needs to.
Yeah, it's not even
Just to either confirm or deny. And if it's deny, that's fine. If that's the truth.
or as the show is called, it's not just the rabbit hole, as the show is called, connecting the dots, right?
Well, there you go. Let's use that term.
Yeah, you pull out enough of the dots and then you start connecting them. You go, this doesn't make sense. And then you're looking for more coincidences and dots to connect. So since you brought up COVID, obviously I've mentioned this when you've interviewed me on Money Talks. I could see before the fact that there was some event coming, which was going to be triggered from a financial perspective. So let's start off with COVID, right? Where did you see what was happening in New Zealand, or where did you try and first figure out or see signs that something wasn't right or didn't meet the sniff test, so to speak?
Well, I was on it early because we started reporting it as a news story as soon as kind of the trickle at first of the story broke. So I knew about that. And then I saw the ramping up because I was in news, radio news. So I saw it ramping up from just that little trickle through to this, industrial level, military grade, every day, the totals of how many people have tested positive and things like that. And, the fear thing was coming on. So I could sort of see it going somewhere. And then we had the benefit in New Zealand of a slight delay. What was happening overseas was happening earlier to them than us. So we kind of got to see that. But then as it became more crazy, that's when I started to think, when they're starting to talk about locking people down and things like that, how are we going to afford this?
It's called the printing press.
Well, I've found out more since then. But, if economic activity and the normal flow of activity is constrained, it won't take long before, business is really affected. And turnover is a great thing. So that starts to grind to a halt. You know that there are problems. And then, of course, that's when you start to hear, well, about quantitative easing already from the US and what they've been doing. But you realize, that's the plan. Then you think, even if you're not very bright like me, well, what happens when all that money floods in? There's no productivity going on. No one's using goods or services except for online purchasing and delivery or whatever. And many people had to rely on those things. Of course, they were scared as well, so that a lot of them didn't want to go out of the house. So when that money comes in, and I'm no genius, Farzin, but then what I thought would happen happened. suddenly the house prices, because I was living in Auckland, so it's in our face all the time there. Suddenly people couldn't believe it. It was like a heaven. It was like a nirvana. You're at home, you don't have to work, but there's all this cheap money at, what was the interest rate? It was 1% or
Yeah, I think
1.75.
it had dropped to ridiculous levels, right? Make the money as cheap as you can.
And so what do you think's going to happen? Of course, none of it went into any sort of productive area at all. And here we all are now figuring out how, grandkids and great grandkids are going to end up paying for this eventually if you're ever going to pay down a debt. So, yeah, I think we're still probably going to zoom back even more to see what a total disaster the whole thing was from every freaking angle,
Yeah, I agree, mate. As I mentioned before, problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah.
This is a 10-year game that they have already planned a collapse, and COVID was the first part of it. Obviously, there had to be some event for them to flood the system as the banking system was going down. So they shut down economies and said, it's okay, we're just trying to keep you safe. We'll give you the money.
You look over to where we are doing the stuff, it misdirection completely.
Oh, of course it is. And it's just because of a virus which was no worse than the flu or a little bit worse than the flu, if you believe the statistics, so to speak. And to be quite honest, right, they had they had the stage set. They had all the right politicians in the right places who were just going to do exactly as they were told. And I think that is where people still haven't seen through that. It didn't matter what political party was in what country. Everything was there's a document out there called lockstep. Everything was in lockstep and every country was going the same direction. In our winter, we were locking up, and summer, supposedly, we were opening up again. And even people who were given the magic injection, they were getting COVID. And I still think people haven't connected the dots there, that it's not the magic injection that actually saved them. There wasn't something that threatening. Um, do you want to first talk about the political drama side of it? As I said, they're all puppets. They are just going to be doing what they have to do.
What I was going to say is, as you're talking there, it reminded me, I was talking to Andrew Bridgen the other day, the British MP, who's quite well known for his activities. He's been supporting Rainer Fulmick recently, but of course he was kicked out of the Tory party, and things have been tough for him. But he was telling the story of how far this goes back. So Tony Blair, this is what Andrew said to me. He said, why do you think Tony Blair took the death penalty off treason in 1998? And that's like 98. That's like almost 30 years ago. And that's just one example. But also here in New Zealand, legislation was changed well in advance to allow or create the framework for then what was deployed in some cases, the gap between what actually eventually happened and, foundations put in place, is a decade. So it goes, it's an intergenerational project.
Of course it is. Of course it is, mate. The book 180 Degrees, as I said, the interview with the author of that book, this is not something that is just played up in the last 2 or 5 years. They actually have a plan through generations of how this is going to play out. And that is why even when we'll go there later, but when we see the digital ID laws, they definitely need it. They need those for the next stage of what is coming. And COVID was a precursor to that, with the scanning the QR codes, and you couldn't get a haircut or you couldn't go out and have a meal if you had not taken the magic injection, so to speak. This was all pre-programming for what's coming next. And this is why when governments say, we're doing it for your own good, people are giving away freedoms every single step because they think that the government has their best interest in mind. It doesn't matter what government, whether it's a Western or an Eastern government, or a Muslim government, or a Western democracy government, or a Christian government, or whatever. Governments like power. And once they're in power and they have a taste of it, they're not giving it up easily. And that's why what I've mentioned is there's revolutions coming globally. We've seen some of those in countries like Sri Lanka, and Nepal and all these kind of places, that's coming on a global scale. And as I've mentioned, a civil war in the US is quite likely starting in the next couple of years. But coming, obviously, we do have a global audience. But what are me and you have spoken enough to understand that there's a bigger plan here, and especially with COVID also, there was a plan. How do you think the country has changed or been shaped over the last 3 or 4 years based on the interviews you've conducted in New Zealand, say, for example?
Well, probably if you're talking about national culture, is that what you're talking about? Sort of,
Yeah. What's happening in New Zealand from a New Zealand perspective?
I think the real change started in 1984, coincidentally. Nothing related to the book, of course. But that's when the neocon was Chicago School of Economics project was applied to us.
Yeah.
So all the publicly owned strategic assets were sold off cheap, very quickly. And the whole idea was the private sector runs things better, so it'll be cheaper, faster, stronger. No, it was a lot more expensive. And in fact, we lagged behind on telecommunications prices, overpriced for years and years and years. Only recently that's come into some kind of parity with the rest of the world. And people got greedy fast. That's what happened. They thought that we come out of, and people used to describe our economy pre-84 as East German, kind of, with, tatty cars. And it wasn't like that. It was actually, the standard of living was very good. But, people who wanted to be entrepreneurs and soar into the global market were restrained in certain ways. That could have been fixed. Import licensing meant that there was a lot of control amongst small players around with power who could import things, which meant that, of course, we never got great global competitive prices because of that. That could have been fixed as well. There were all sorts of things that could have been smoothed over or changed that would have had the positive effect that people were talking about. No, this was a total refit. Everything was kind of thrown overboard, including the assets. And this whole new thinking about being entrepreneurial, and that's good. And share market players, what happened to our share market? It crashed. In fact, it led to the most risk-averse mentality in our history for 25 years. That's what that led to. So the culture changed then, and the old New Zealand sort of went into the rearview mirror, and that was steady as she goes, play to your strengths, agriculture's good, make sure you've got your markets. And it was kind of boring, I suppose, but it worked. But oh no. So that's where it started to change, 1984, probably hitting full stride in the 2010 to 2015s, fully developed now into a neoliberal political economic project, like all of them. And if I sound a little bit nostalgic as I say these things, well, for families, the standard of living when we operated in the old way was way better than it is now, by a country mile, Farzin.
Yeah, but that's been a global phenomenon, right, in the Western countries because of the amount of debt that was brought about on people. People, they encouraged a woman to go out and work, and obviously houses got more expensive. So you had to drop your kids off to kindergarten instead of raising your own kids.
It's more to that. It's a bit of a dirty word now, egalitarian, but it actually used to mean quite a bit. See, what's been instilled in that time that I've mentioned up till now is, well, really just a focus on materialism. Everything is measured by how big the house is, how nice the front lawn is, and what the location is. Is it facing this way or that way? Is the school down the road? Is there potential for this particular? No one really used to think about those things. They used to think we're lucky to have a good, solid house. it's warm, because the electricity that we all paid for as taxpayers, building dams, etc., is so cheap that we can run the heaters all day. It doesn't matter. That's why it was put there, to enable standard of living and industrial development. So the attitude has changed as well, which has fed that new way of life. Of course, if you want to have the best house, you've both got to work.
Yeah, but even if you don't want the best house, Paul, you need the wife to work, right? I think the quality of life has gone down. It's just the quantity. Everyone's measuring not the value of life.
It doesn't have to be the wife.
No,
Whoever,
either or. But the wife is the nurturing person who looks after the kids and
but if they're
raises the
earning
kids.
huge amounts more than you, the husband, or maybe the wife, maybe you can sort that out to get the best of that. But one of you should be there. One of you should be there.
Exactly. Instead of handing over your kids, and the state likes that because the state doesn't want you educating your kids and it doesn't want homeschooling.
I got to subsidize it. I got to subsidize your mortgage enslavement.
Most people have, and this is what I've said, all the problems start from the money tree. Most people think the government has some magical tree where they just give up people money. If only they understood how money was recycled through your taxes and GST that you pay on everything. You're a slave to the system for the government to then spend as much as they want based on their taxes, and they still take more debt. And this is what I've said, man, our education system needs to be broken down and redesigned, because there's nothing they teach us in school helps you in day-to-day life, unless you're a plumber or an electrician or something along those lines. Everything else doesn't add real value to your life. If you think about, I was looking at I attended a global conference not that long ago in the US, and in that they were talking about, in the early 1900s, the US economy, late 1800s to early 1900s, was still agrarian. And then came the Industrial Revolution and the Ford cars and all of that. And now about 60 to 65% of the US economy is just mostly people sitting on computers, just doing financial engineering, selling stocks and this and that. And this is why you see China moving forward, because China is doing other things. China is actually producing stuff, whereas the Western countries are too busy flipping homes based on easy credit, or just selling their shares or buying new shares and all this financial engineering. But you grew up in New Zealand, and now in 2025, the state of New Zealand that you see with all these digital laws and all that stuff coming in, and the managed retreat, which some people might know what it is. Where do you think they're trying to take us in the bigger scheme of things? Hi guys, if you're getting value from what I share, please take a second to like this video and hit subscribe. It helps get these ideas in front of more people who need clarity in a noisy world. And if you know someone who would benefit, share it with them. Your support grows this community and keeps me creating content that makes a real difference. Thank you for being part of the journey, and keep connecting the dots.
Well, yeah, that's a very interesting question, because there are different ways that you can think about it. Purely in a technocratic way, where you see everything as a machine that could be tinkered or upgraded or whatever. I can see how people can get on a sort of like a treadmill of finding problems just to match available or theoretical technology with, for those pure reasons. But I think it's more than that. I think there's a class now that enjoys wielding that power, and it's done with a smiley face. I've been to some of these coastal managed retreat meetings around the place, and I've seen the officials and, the way they carry themselves in these situations. They really believe that they know. And you don't, because you're just a simple citizen. You can't even be expected to know any of this. That's kind of the attitude. So so let's say you're in a region that you're using a completely inappropriate computer model that's not even used by the UN to calculate inundation around a coastal area from sea level rise. And it's, the parameters are so far out, it bears no resemblance to reality. Yet you use it, you then put it on the LIM reports, which is the property data reports of the properties, that it's a sea level flooding risk. All of a sudden, up go your insurance premiums. Nothing has happened, right? Nothing has happened. The other thing is, once you've got everybody sort of on the ropes a bit about this thing, you could start dividing and conquering the local citizens. Who do we allow to move there, or which street are we going to take away? Oh, I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side of the street. It's a way of playing with people, power, exercising power over people. And I really think there is something in that. They might not admit it, but they like it. They like having that sort of control. And the other thing is they squeal like little piglets if you take them to task on it or criticize them. So they're very sensitive about it. So I think there's a lot of that because they can, and they like to see, I say jump, you jump. I don't have to jump, but you have to jump.
But that is, they say they generally, it's sociopaths who actually are attracted to politics because they like the power that they can yield over other people, because those people have given away their power to the politicians or to the local authorities who they see as somehow maybe they're smarter than me. That's why they got elected or re-elected. And that is where I think humanity has given up their own power, where they don't believe in themselves. They look up to a high authority to save them. And that is the problem we have. And this is what I'm saying. This is a bigger picture. The thing you mentioned about a managed retreat, if some of our audience might not know, the global audience, RCR obviously did a documentary on managed retreat where certain geographic events, I would pretty much say orchestrated, because we know about geoengineering and all of that, where the model.
But it's only the computer models, Farzin. There's no reality here. They're just
There's
models.
none. There's none. As I said, the whole climate agenda is a hoax. And you see some banks are pulling back from that. The World Economic Forum is trying to pull back a little bit at times, so is BlackRock. But the whole point is that is the only thing that can unite the whole world. Okay. And this is what, when COVID also happened, the enemy was a virus, a magical virus that nobody knew about. And supposedly, as I mentioned in my first interview, when I interviewed a gentleman in the UK, we mocked this, where somewhere it was 2 meters and somewhere it was 6 feet. And the virus was somehow geographically knowledgeable. It knew exactly when you were on your lunch break, so it wouldn't attack you. So you could take off your mask and have a meal. And then as soon as your meal was finished, you had to put on the mask. It was honestly ridiculous, but this is what I'm saying. The virus was used to unite people.
Playing with people again. That's exercising power. It's the same thing. You can put on the mask. I'll put on the mask. I don't have to put on my mask, but you put on yours, okay? Oh, we did it. Oh, great. That feels
Have
good.
you seen some recent videos when France, all these people get on a stage, nobody's wearing a video. The camera was already on, they didn't realize it. And then they're like, okay, the timer starts, it's 10, 9, 8, 7, and they're all like wearing their masks just because they're going to come on camera. It was all a spectacle, man. It was all a spectacle. But the whole point is, if they've got to take us in a certain direction, they have to have humanity not believe in themselves. And that is the problem that I
The
have.
other thing, Farzan, is that I think people think that, it's one side against the other, but it's
It's not.
not. It's every side against everybody. That's the way it works. So it's interesting. You might be anti-trans ideology, but I'm going to fall out with you on climate. We'll agree on the other thing, but we'll still fall out on climate. We'll still won't talk to each other. So people got to, I think, always remember that if you're going through your set of filters, try and work out what you're seeing. It's build in there that the part of the structure of it. It's a feature, not an option. It's a feature that is to keep everybody disagreeing with everyone.
On at least something. Yeah, exactly
On
right.
at least something that of purpose that might separate you otherwise from having a closer relationship. And then if you think of that, the primary driver is to drive people apart, isn't it? Really?
Exactly. Exactly. And this is where people can't see through it. In that book, 180 Degrees, again, he talks about they've taught us to slice it horizontally as compared to vertically. There's a slice, and he talks about it 99% of humanity is fine. It's the 1% who are the sociopaths. But they're trying to divide us on different ways, whether it's religion, race, color, nationality,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Something you're going to disagree with somebody else on, and that's what they use to divide us. But having said that, because you interview so many people around the world, do you think after COVID, people are starting to wake up? Is there a shift in, or is it just because we're in our little echo chambers that we think that the world is changing, but people aren't waking up?
I think we're the ones who are prepared to say something about it. And that, for a lot of people, that's a huge thing to get over. Actually, one of the things I didn't realize how strong that is for a lot of people, is having the confidence, first of all, in themselves, but just generally. It's like, being really scared of a public speaking engagement or something like that. You just want to stay in the background. But that doesn't mean they ain't thinking of it. And I would say that as things are becoming more clear to people, they're seeing what's happening to their people in their circles around them, and their friends are telling them what's happening, and they're seeing in the newspaper, there's a whole line of stories every day: cancer this, cancer that, sudden death, unexplained, medical event, all those descriptors. So they know. That means that people like us do have to keep talking. But we need to do it. The more I've gone along with this, the more I see that it needs to be done strategically. Because if you flamethrow at someone or fire hose them, they can't stand up with it. It's too much. So we have to kind of sprinkle it on at a level that you take it, but also, relentless for that to happen. Now, is it any of our business if people don't wake up fast? In the end, people got free will, they can make a choice. But I tell you what, the world I'm forced to live in because of that, I'm not happy with. I won't be happy with. I don't want that. And it's not a right to have that for me. I don't want, but maybe it is a right, but it's not a right for other people to change that on me, because it's still in the normal bounds of things. It's not way out there, not way out like some of these people. So, yeah, long answer to your question. I think there is a waking up going on, and I'm a bit sick of that term. It makes me feel a little cringy because we've been saying it for so long, I suppose, and you live at hope. But people know, getting back to what connecting the dots is all about. Yeah, I think some dots are being connected, and it's going to be really interesting how people deal with that en masse. I have a few theories and worries and thoughts about that, but that could actually be the real revolution when that gets to a critical mass, because there will be people grabbing their pitchforks at that point.
Yeah, please tell us. What's your theory? Yeah.
Well, I suppose South Africa is an example, and how they dealt with the aftermath of apartheid with the reconciliation sort of procedure they put in place, because some of the crimes were just so bad that and so numerous that just to deal with them at a normal level of punishment and the court system would have probably ground the nation to a halt. But what do you do when that nurse gave your kid the shot that killed him? I mean, what am I just supposed to go, oh, well, they didn't know. Oh, well, they were trying to do that. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Something has to happen. It can't be nothing. So, yeah, I'm curious. What do you think, Farzin? How do people deal with that? Well, I probably know how I deal with it.
To be quite honest,
I want to face that person and hold them, or ask them, or hold them accountable. If I've got the information to do so, hold them accountable. And how do you do that with, I mean, if you look at the VIA system, which is the calm system here, which is the central database for reporting adverse events to vaccination. Okay, so there were about 2,800 reports of adverse events. MedSafe, which is the medical authority in New Zealand that signs up all the drugs and pharmacy prescribables, says that they, in their estimation, and this is consistent with other systems around the world, they only catch a 20th, a minimum of 2% of the actual adverse events. Those are the reported ones, but they themselves admit that it's huge amount more than that. And using those numbers, we're looking at about 408,000 people who have been severely badly damaged or killed. Now, that's the population of one of the major cities outside of Auckland. Imagine if you sort of went into a city and did that much damage to the population in a very short time. Do you think anyone would be getting away with it?
But Paul, this is the thing, right? You're focusing on the numbers. The thing is, this started in 20...
Oh, no, my point was, what happens when you get, a third of those going, I want a deal to the person who did this? I mean,
it's not gonna happen, because the whole point is there, and this is what I'm saying, through history and cycles repeat. At some stage, as I mentioned this, just to slow it down, during COVID, I said COVID doesn't affect everyone because 90% of the population believed that the government was saying the truth because they were that hypnotized. Whereas 10 of us saw through, none of it made sense. And even at that stage, the numbers coming out didn't make sense. The graphs were wrong. The government and the prime minister said, only believe us for the truth. So you were not allowed to even do your own research. Okay. So that is a red flag straight away.
Well, that's such a lot now. That is,
of course it is. But this is the same thing that happened during world wars as well, mate. It's propaganda. You have to blame an external something. Now, in this case, there was a virus. There wasn't even a country or an enemy. It was a virus, and we all had to unite, okay? And the next thing, as I said, because the virus thing, they wanted to play it out longer, but they now are jumping back on the global warming. But just coming back to the virus thing, as when you've interviewed me on Money Talks, I've said this 10,000 times. The monetary system has run its course. Western governments have all promised, and you were born, raised in New Zealand. I wasn't born and raised there, but I was in New Zealand since the age of 21. The Western democracies work in a way where you're supposed to be taxed, and then after an age of 60 or 65, the government looks after you. Okay? That makes it acceptable for people to say, okay, we're okay with paying taxes because you're looking after us, or whether it's free medical health care. And now you can see what is happening is in countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, UK, a lot of these systems are breaking down. If you want a doctor's appointment, it takes more than a month. And in Canada, sometimes it's even worse than that if you don't have private health insurance. So firstly, the cracks were already appearing because the money is starting to run out and the government has to take on more debt. COVID was a convenient excuse to, and I'm going to say this out, which I did say in one of our interviews, I think about 2 years back. If governments have a certain part of the population that is getting closer to retirement, my liability to pay those people gets higher. Okay? Because I have fewer, let's say New Zealand 5 million population, I have only 2 million or 3 million contributing to the tax base. And a big portion of that is moving into the retirement stages. That's a liability to me on my balance sheet. So most of these Western governments saw that they're having fewer babies. That's why I also told you in these Western countries, the immigration floodgates were open because they needed younger generation from third world countries to come in and contribute taxes. Now, people are going to be a liability on you. What COVID does, and I'm not saying this was done, I'm just, again, connecting the dots or theory that I'm just running through, is how do we kill them off? Okay? Older people were sent to hospitals and they were said they definitely need the injections. I'm not saying that killed them. But what I'm saying is, even if their immune systems were low and they were sent into hospitals, a lot of old people died. But what you're saying now is, it's not just the old people. is the younger generation. A lot of kids, I have clients whose kids had to, one client in particular who has two sons, and one was going to represent New Zealand in the soccer team, the football team. And it was a decision between not playing, representing New Zealand internationally, and took the vaccine. And unfortunately, a year later, they just figured out that he's never going to be able to run and play soccer. His entire career, soccer career, has been taken away for that one incident, right? And that is what I'm saying is people might wake up and connect the dots, might not. But as I've said again and again, when the money system change comes with the digital ID and the CBDC, that will quickly wake up 90% of the population when their money suddenly disappears.
Yeah, but when will that be?
It's not long now. We're stepping into 2026. The whole system crashes and burns by 2032, Matt. So over the next 6 years, we're lucky to be alive, living during this time. There's certain cycles that play out. As I said, there'll be multiple wars. There'll be revolutions against governments, because it doesn't matter what government it is. But come on, like the Bangladesh, India, all the Asian countries, they know their governments are corrupt. You just got to bribe someone to get your way. In Western countries, we thought, no, this doesn't happen in our country. And now we're seeing what's happening. As in the World Economic Forum openly, Klaus Schwab said, we get into cabinets of
We have penetrated the cabinet. There was Canadian government.
They openly flaunt it because they thought they'll get away with it. But there is pushback coming. People are waking up because they're losing families. But where do you see the biggest resistance coming, or do you see the resistance not coming?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. If there's a resistance coming, I'll have to understand how forceful that can be. I think it's probably more likely that parallel systems will start grinding away and trying alternative things. That could come with a risk because the the power structure won't like that. People doing their own thing. So I think a lot of people might try that, but then they have to figure out. See, the ultimate question is if you disconnect from this system, that means that you can't have a phone anymore. You're offline, basically. Maybe there's a few smart ways you can do it, but the average person is going to have to really come up to speed if they're going to figure that out. You have to. I think you're going to have to, in the end, make a real cold hard decision. Do I disconnect or do I stay connected? And what gives me more pain? What's more unacceptable? What's morally questionable? What goes against my values? So I'm anticipating, if it goes at the speed that you're talking, probably within my lifetime, and I'm 62 now, I might be having to have an off-grid rest of my life. Because I sure don't want to be part of any evil thing. No way.
It's not just off-grid, Matt. It's actually stepping backwards. What most people see as progress, and obviously this will come out in my interview with Fergus O'Connor Green as well, is most people don't realize the progress that we're being fed with the 3G and the 4G and the 5G is actually the plan, and that is what is not good for us. Going back to your own sovereignty is not a bad thing. Doesn't mean you have to totally disconnect. What would we do when we didn't have mobile phones and we didn't have instant gratification on Facebook and Instagram or X,
right?
Right?
Yeah, to live in that. We're going to have to come up to something. It's possible to do, I know. But boy, talk about a different way of life compared to...
Yeah, I agree. But what did our parents do? At least my parents, when there were no phones. Oh, they used to go to work and they came and watched television only at night when they were at home. They did not watch it 24/7 on their phones.
That's right.
We don't need that news cycle 24/7, which is where they have got us distracted and they get to do things behind the scenes. And this is what I'm saying. It's actually not a bad thing what they're going to try and do, because it's actually going to make us disconnect from the 5Gs. It's going to make us read books again. It's going to make us connect with Mother Earth again, become self-sufficient again. And if you don't have a mortgage and your house is paid off, as long as you can pay the rates, it's totally different. And communities coming together. And again, I don't think we need to fight their system. We just need to build a different system, which a lot of smart people are building.
If they let us.
Again, see, I know you're my guest on this show, but again, you're giving them too much power. Well, if they let us, you're sovereign, right? You're a human being. You have a sovereign, and this is where is your where do you draw the line? For me, it was like with the magic injections. It was like, no, this is my body. I'm not going to allow anyone to put something in it without my permission.
Funny you say that. The first time it ever crossed my mind about body autonomy, was many years ago over fluoride. Because now I just assumed that fluoride was probably good for your teeth. I had a grandmother who was a dental nurse early on and used to sing the praises of fluoride. Mind you, they were all told that it was great. And maybe early on you could find out people in certain areas had better teeth than others, and it was down to fluoride. But I always had a problem with it being compulsory in the water supply. Because of the fundamental nature of that life-giving infrastructure. There's no need to put anything in it. If you want to have fluoride, you can add it to your water later after it's been through the system. So actually, that was always a niggle for me.
It's not just that. Think about when you have food. You might want less salt. I want more salt. If I want more salt, I can put more salt, right? But if I put too much salt, you can't take the salt out. So it's just common sense. But when it comes to other things, people just give their power away and say, no, that must be right. They must.
It just assumes that none of us have the brains. We're so dumb we can't even stop our teeth decaying. We're sort of at that level. So I always had a problem with that. So when COVID came along, and it's true that it was never actually, no one ever held you down, though. I wonder how many opportunistic vaxes were given in hospitals to people who are either too worn out to be awake and even aware of it, or, I wonder. I'm sure that went on. I'm pretty sure. But I was on the basis that you're not going to tell me to put anything into me that full stop. You could recommend it.
But at least this is, see, the first thing is when you woke up with the fluoride thing a few years back, right? So it takes people, because we've all been programmed into the propaganda. And that's why I say you got to read more books and you got to go get more curious and connect more dots. I can tell you why the fluoride thing's been happening, because I've read that book 180 Degrees. It's the fluoride, the glyphosate, the 5G, everything combined, and the microwaves in our kitchens and all of that is what, and they're dusting geoengineering. There's 4 things that when come together help them get through the blood-brain barrier. And that's the whole point of all of these coming together. So if you take the fluoride out, not as effective. It's the fluoride, the glyphosate, the 5G, and I think the magnesium and silver something that is being dusted on us. So even with the fluoride, you have a choice. Do you have a choice with the geoengineering? No, you're not, because you might just be going out to get some fresh air.
People are completely unaware of that. And if you mention to many people, they think they're crazy. And I used to think, because I'm into airplanes and big jet planes and stuff, and I know that they send contrails across the sky. I know how that works. And but there comes a point where there's so much sort of weight of, and when I say evidence, it could only be from what I can observe from afar, but from every angle, you wonder what always gets me though is how the hell did they think they could start doing it, and how they've been getting away with it?
They've been doing it since the 1970s, man. It's only now that people are waking up due to your TikToks and X's. But people who don't believe it, like when they call people like us, when we put on our thinking caps, conspiracy theorists, the difference between a conspiracy theory and conspiracy reality is give it about 6 to 9 months, right? Because in the US, in the Senate, there's so many states who are talking and passing bills to ban it. I can tell you, when in India, in Delhi, the pollution was too much, it openly was in the newspapers that they're doing geoengineering because of the smog and the pollution in the air. Places like Dubai, they openly do geoengineering because they need rain. So this is not even a conspiracy theory anymore, because most countries are admitting that we're doing it for other reasons. But what is it? There's these particles that are flying on you and you're inhaling them, and it's on falling on your foods. So whether you like it or not, you're consuming them. With the fluoride, the whole argument is still about it coming in the water, which I agree with you, is we should have a bloody choice. But it goes back to the informed consent again. Fluoride, did you have informed consent? COVID, did people have informed consent?
It's impossible to achieve that with fluoride, because when it's in the water, you just can't do that. I think, though, one of the, I know there's so many threats, but the one thing that really has me, and I'm still thinking about it, trying to map it through what it means. But this artificial general intelligence, this level where basically, the way I understand it is, you get to that, basically AI has sucked up everything humans have ever known at that point, because that is the singularity, right? Where it goes beyond the intelligence of everybody collectively altogether, and anyone who's ever come, who's here now, maybe to come. I wonder what happens in that situation when an AI runs out of information, no new information. What happens? That's an interesting thing. No one's talked about that, but you do get information's finite. What happens there? What does AI do to try and find more information? How does that affect it's the technology's effect on human civilization going forward? The other thing is, I've heard so many theorists say that AI could never get to consciousness because algorithms dictate in the end what operates computational processes. But the thing is, when you get very powerful things, and getting a little sort of metaphysical now, we don't know what seeks that out, what finds it, what utilizes it, and we don't know if it's friend or foe or anything. So we've got all these technologies. We've got the digital cage coming in, but ultimately, who will run the cage? And I mean, even now, I see one of the Chinese robots, humanoid robots, has just broken a record. It did a 100K run on one charge. Now think about that. What happens when you're in the street of the town and you're looking down the street, and there's a whole platoon of robot soldiers? I mean, it can get pretty dystopian. So I like to try and map out what is ahead, factoring in human nature, and that we know, I think it's fair to say, people enjoy wielding power over other people. But that hierarchy can go up beyond human beings. We just don't know what we're dealing with. So I just wonder if, if in the end we're so threatened. Mind you can always turn the power off, can't you?
Well, see, this is what I'm saying. I think you don't need to worry about AI too much. The whole thing is, when we had the Industrial Revolution, people who, as I said, again, agrarian, people who worked in agriculture lost their jobs. Initially, there's a disruption, then they move into other jobs. Then came the Industrial Revolution in the steam engine and manufacturing. That was disrupted. People found other jobs. First of all, AI is never going to be conscious. That's a human thing. And this is, again, linked back to the fluoride. Because whether you believe in the third eye or not, we go into metaphysics and spirituality and all of that stuff. Fluoride, getting through the blood-brain barrier is to affect that, okay? Is to affect that. So you cannot think outside your limited materialistic space. And that is what it has to do with. But just think about AI as a modern Google. It just does it a little better, a little faster. It's a language-based model. Based on what you tell it, it brings it back. Sometimes much better than your expectations, because your expectations haven't achieved that.
Farzin, I'm thinking more than that. Sorry to jump in. What if a conscious entity that we are unaware of, okay, and this is possible. I mean, we exist. There are other variations possible. There are other entities that are part of consciousness that we're unaware of. They're a lot more powerful, a lot more developed, know how to use it, and can seek out a system of artificial intelligence invade it and make it do what you want it to do. But you understand the concept I'm putting up. What I'm saying is we've got to be careful that we're not playing with things that could really blow up in our face big time.
Of course. And people who have created AI have actually said that as well. And I think people only think about the money that could be made. OpenAI has, again, recently been kicked out of another African country because they were scanning people's irises and all of that stuff. So, as I said, the pushback is coming. AI is just generally good for these authoritarian people who want power. And how do you control power? And that's why I keep telling people the next step is the one where you really have to fight back and be a lion and not a sheep, is the digital ID and the central bank digital currency. Because once you're locked into the digital grid and your life and your sustenance depends on money that they can create or cancel, that's when you cease to exist. So that is the point, which is the line where you do not cross, where humanity should actually wake up, I think. Because if with artificial intelligence and all this computing power, they'll be able to control everyone in New Zealand, Australia, or Canada, or India, wherever it is, because it's just automatically going to run it. There'll be rules coded into it. And Farzin and Paul said this on the chat, so they cannot use their money this week.
But Farzin, there'll be, and this will be another interesting thing, what proportion of the population buys into it? Because when you get believers, boy, do they believe. Yeah, they really believe.
Even the ones who are on the fence, I can tell you, even with injection, with the money, even the people who are slightly doubtful or skeptical, when they said they couldn't go out for events or they couldn't go to work, when you challenge people's livelihoods, then they swayed in. So it's either a carrot or a stick. Now, with the monetary system, and I said digital ID, the WEF has, or World Economic Forum, has already said the next one might be a cyber pandemic. There have been incidents recently, again in the last 2 weeks, where planes and flights were disrupted. So if there's a cyber pandemic, whether you blame it on an Iran or an alien or whoever it is, shut it down.
You talking about the most recent Airbus issue with the software?
Yeah, it was in the last couple of weeks, right? So again, they're putting this into our psyche. We're constantly hearing that these things can happen, and then there'll be a big one, just like the COVID was a big one. Again, as I've said, it's problem, reaction, solution. They know what the solution is. How big a problem do we create? So people just gobble it up and go, governments, please help us.
That Airbus fault was caused by electromagnetic disturbances from the sun, apparently corrupting software which had been recently updated. So they actually went back to an earlier version of software to correct it, which is normally not the way. But this is, I get back to that. I mean, already there is, well, it's one of the Baltic countries. One of them is it Armenia, in the cabinet of the government. One of the cabinet members is AI.
Yeah, she's a female, but obviously the politicians are already rising up against it. People are saying it's ridiculous. But again, do we need politicians? We really don't need politicians. Like, let's say, for example, in America, you could program the whole constitution, because right now you see judges who are going against Trump and all of that, right? And politicians and governments can be bribed. So the whole point is, what if the whole constitution was put into AI and it just followed the constitution? Do you really need all these corrupt judges based on the ideologies? So yes, there's goods and bads, and everything needs to be debated. But again, I don't think AI is the end of the world. It's here to help us. Yes, a lot of people will lose jobs, but again, if I'm being honest, man, if you look at Western democracies, even when I was working in banking, 70% of the population is just working at desk up paper pushers, right? You get an email and then you forward that email to someone else, and then some other department looks after it because it's segregation of duties and all of that stuff. So the whole point is half of those jobs are useless. Wouldn't you be better off sitting at home? That's what they're going to sell you. Sit at home, we'll give you universal basic income in a central bank digital currency. But have you taken your 6 monthly vaccines? Otherwise, you do not get your UBI.
You'll have to put people into a virtual reality, otherwise there'll be nothing to do in life. It'll be a meaningless experience for many people, and that's psychologically very damaging.
Yeah, but again, yeah. But a lot of people are still, again, I'm not saying I'm superior, but quite a few years back, almost a decade back, I went down a little bit of spirituality and meditation. I just realized money was not everything. I think a lot of people are still in that rat race and they've been caught up in that. So they can't think outside the square, right? They can't think outside the box. And unfortunately, they're caught in it. So they think they're going to lose their job. But hey, once upon a time, our ancestors used to dig and pick up cotton in fields for 18 hours a day. And now we don't. So it made our lives better. Technology is here to serve us, not rule over us. That's where I think it doesn't need to go that far.
Well, we certainly feel like there's I mean, there's supposedly tipping points all the time, everywhere. You maybe just don't recognize them at the time. You're probably more than you realize. But it does seem that we're at a tipping point.
I totally agree.
Really fascinating to be alive in such a time. Witnessing it, watching it in real time.
If you look at it from a spiritual point of view, some of us were actually placed here at this timeline to do exactly what we're doing also. I'm not getting too spiritual, but the whole point is it is amazing to be alive during this time because we'll tell our children and grandchildren. But it's also a spiritual fight that is on our hand. It's not a physical fight, it's a spiritual fight. And touching on what you said earlier as well, the whole point is we're not going to change somebody's beliefs overnight, but just having these open, honest conversations, connecting the dots and let people start thinking for themselves. People 5 years back in New Zealand thought COVID was real and some of them might still think it. Maybe 20% of them will change their mind after their family members were harmed, or maybe they read some new material, or they heard people on RCR, and they're starting to challenge narratives and whether it was absolutely necessary or not now. But the whole point is for them to also now see the next act that's coming. Be prepared for that because fool me once is right, fool me twice. Come on. You've got to stop being fooled and put your head in the sand, pull it out of the sand, stand up for your family, be a man or a strong woman, and say enough is enough. I refuse to be taken advantage of anymore because that's what coming back to the money talks, Mike, that's what a monetary system is. You're a slave for life.
Well, I think we need to sit down at some point and get a new kind of agreement, bipartisan agreement. I don't know what you call what I'm talking about, covenant, something like that, where we actually make some big decisions on how we operate an economy fundamentally. And I think towards productivity and standard of living has got to be the goal because everything comes from that anyway. And the incentive for people is always there in that. I think we need to decide how we create money, and with the money that we create, because we can kind of create money out of thin air, we know that's possible, but we can do it in such a way where there's also a payoff. It's an investment. It's not just creating liquidity to burn away. There are things that that we have still in our economy and in our national infrastructure. The money was spent long time ago, some of it before I was even born, it's going back a bit, and we're still getting the use out of it. When you amortize those sorts of productive expenditures over a good period of time, I think it can make a lot of sense, but we don't do that. There are certain strategic things that we don't do in that way that I think we need to, and move away from housing and that materialism which creates that housing because it's a status symbol. It's the most obvious status symbol you can have in a society like this, and get it into stuff that is productive, and creates, first of all, a nice environment to live in, warm, safe, healthy, all those things, with opportunity. If you're smart, you want to push it, you don't want someone putting the handbrake on all the time. I get that. But, I don't sound like a sort of like a planned economy so much, in the old sort of 5-year plan sort of commie way of doing things. But I do think we need to work out, create some dots so we can join them up and work because I think we owe it to future generations. I mean, my standard of living as a young person growing up as a kid into adulthood, I mean, that wasn't self-generated. That was on the backs of the people before us. So we have to carry that on. And I just think everyone sits around sort of happy with or frozen in the status quo. I want to see some real smart minds come together, and I want to see not so much a full reboot, but I want to see a serious upgrading of how we do things, you know?
But it is coming. And when you say you want some real smart minds, let's say, for example, you and I have been talking for 2.5 years. I know solutions to the monetary system. But do you think any politician's going to pick up the phone and call me? No, they're not. But again, the smart people will have got the solutions, and they are coming, but it's coming at the other end of this system burning down. Okay, so the whole point is sometimes the forest fire has to burn away all the dead leaf for regeneration. The other good thing you touched on there, mate, fix the money, fix the world. I think it was Andrew Jackson, or somebody had mentioned it. The monetary system is the root cause of all of this. Okay, all of this. And they're using that against us, where we have to sell our time for money, because God created us all equal. We all have the same 24 hours. If you believe there's 24 hours in a day, 24 hours in a day. But some people sell it for $20 an hour, and some people sell it for $100 an hour, and somebody might sell it for $10,000 an hour. The monetary system is designed again to divide us as well. Okay. Yes, of course, everyone has different talents and they deserve different amounts for their hours. But the monetary system was designed to enslave you. Even when you said something along the lines of the GDP, which is gross domestic product, we're just measuring it for the sake of measuring it, and it's supposed to always keep going up. There's no value in it. There's no value in it because the government can just borrow more, spend into the economy, and your GDP will go up, but the debt to GDP has gone up as well. So the whole point is it's a statistic, again, used to lie for accounting purposes. The whole thing is the banking system, the money system needs to be changed. We need honest money, and that doesn't happen till the other end of this whole system burning down. And if I'm being honest, mate, there have been politicians who have tried to change the monetary system, even in their own countries, and they've ended up dead or shot. So let's be honest, it's bigger than you and I or any other politician who's
Well, we're
trying
going
to
to try
change this.
something, and here's the other thing. I'd be digging the place like crazy for gold. I'd recover as much physical gold at a national urgency level, that standard of seriousness, urgency.
I think the New Zealand government just approved a project somewhere. I've got that email. I actually saw it. It's been approved recently. It's in the last stages of signing off. It's an Australian company. I can't remember the exact name.
Yeah, but I presumably they take the gold. No, you don't take the gold.
No, they're not going to give it to New Zealand. But the whole point is
it's only for it's got to be. It can only be for a nationalized resource for the country. And if we're going to mine it, we're going to get our own gear and we're going to do it ourselves. We need to fill vaults with that stuff. We need to fill vault. So when that whole debasement thing comes apart of currencies.
But why would they do that, mate? Why would a country or the politician actually dig it and keep it in walls when countries like New Zealand, Australia at least has 82 tons or 89 tons of gold. New Zealand has zero. Canada has zero. And Canada has so much of their own gold.
Over 20 or 30 years, think about how much gold we can recover.
The system's going to collapse in the next few years, mate. So you don't have that much time. And the powers that be don't want gold in your perception. They don't want you to know about gold. They want you to know about that credit card in your wallet.
This is me running the place, Farzin. This is what I'd start.
When you become prime minister, and it is very possible at the other end of this, as I'm saying, the smart people, whether it's in money and politics, even the political system, there's a way to design it smarter. First of all, you get rid of term limits, something that Trump is trying in the US right now. Completely get rid of it. As I've said, if I was designing this, you can only be a prime minister for 2 years and you can never ever be a prime minister again. Whatever politician comes in and passes a law, in 2 years you're out. So then you have to live under those rules as a citizen for the rest of your life. And then we will see how many politicians pass rules or regulations or laws that are going to affect them. They're only there for 2 years, but that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. If the political system was designed that way, you'd see a lot of people doing stuff that will help them once they leave politics in those 2 years, rather than harm the country and just line their own pockets.
At this stage of the game, I'm not even convinced that the kind of form of democracy we have at the moment actually works anymore.
It's not democracy. It's a lie.
Yeah, okay, whatever you want to call it, but the perception of it that people have when they go out and vote. I'm wondering if, we really need a dose of benevolent dictator. But how do you know that that dictator is going to be benevolent, or he might start off benevolent and then next thing you know, it's turning into a hellscape. So I don't really know. But here's the thing: everything is up for questioning. Everything is up for grabs. Surely.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And that's why I said these cycles repeat every 80 or 100 years. The generation who has lived through this has already died off. And unfortunately, there's very few people who remember or have read books from those times to understand what is coming up. So this is the 80 to 100-year cycle. It's going to play out regardless of whether you and me talk or not, because human beings repeat cycles through thousands of years. This happened in the Roman empires as well, and this will happen again. It's going to happen in the next 5 or 6 years, and we're lucky to be alive during this time.
Well, what
to
did the
see it.
Roman Empire do to solve their problem?
They didn't. It collapsed within 5 years.
No, but in going down, they were doing anything they could think of. They even took in Christianity if it was going to make the difference.
They're doing the same thing, taking on too much debt, having too many wars, debasing their currency, circuses and gladiators and circuses and all of that stuff. So, yeah. So, essentially, history is repeating. It's just
It's
a
like a
matter of
waveform, isn't it? It's like a waveform. And I guess anything can have a waveform. And there must be something in the rhythm of human beings, probably the beds down to the average life expectancy, that creates this 80-year kind of wave or cycle, whatever you want to
It's
call
not
it.
just human beings. Everything in this world is fractal, and that's why we have cycles. Governments think, or politicians think, they can manipulate the economy by, in their case, take on more debt or pass legislation. No, Mother Nature and the universe has cycles, and the cycles are going to play out exactly the way they are. You can tinker a little bit at the edges, but you can't make too much changes because human beings react the same way. And unfortunately, as I said, even with the climate change, they don't call it global warming because the planet is getting colder. Even with the climate change, they only show you a 60-year cycle or an 80-year cycle. And the guys who tell us about global warming are the ones flying in private jets. But if they extended that out to the last 4,000 years, okay, we're not even close. We're not even close to the warming or the cooling of what it has been and what was the last ice age. So they're lying. Their lie is being revealed every single day. If you're an honest scientist, you're not allowed to actually publish your papers and your funding is being pulled out. Just like during COVID, the people who actually told you take ivermectin or do not, just wait and see what happens with the magical injection, were censored, and that is it. When governments are authoritarian, all they can do is censor you. They have to stop people knowing the truth, and that adds more responsibility on people like you and I and our shoulders to share more of the truth. Hi guys, if you're getting value from what I share, please take a second to like this video and hit subscribe. It helps get these ideas in front of more people who need clarity in a noisy world. And if you know someone who would benefit, share it with them. Your support grows this community and keeps me creating content that makes a real difference. Thank you for being part of the journey and keep connecting the dots.
Though we have to be aware, something like climate is really interesting because it's an issue which people can hang their, I don't know, what do they call it, imposter guilt or whatever, on, that they know that what they've been told is that they are impacting on nature. You're kind of a strain to nature, not a benefit to nature. So you're more inclined to believe something like the climate hoax as it's being put forward because it actually makes you feel better about yourself. You can attach an action that you're not doing. You're only thinking something. And that sort of, works against your guilt of how impacting you are in a negative sense on the planet. So it's not a clear-cut argument. There's emotion involved in it as well. That's why it's actually a really good issue if you want to hook someone. Because first of all, you program in that guilt and that fear on climate. And then you get the chance to put yourself on the right side. And that has a psychological effect on people. So it's not just a clear-cut issue. It's more complicated than that, why people believe certain things and follow certain things. But that one particularly is kind of a masterful stroke because people connect with it, for reasons other than the actual, chemical stuff that's going on in the real world and atmospheres, etc. They just sort of feel better about themselves just with that.
Exactly, man. They always use fear. They always use fear. And as you said, they bundle an emotion on top of it, which is guilt. That is exactly why if you go to a supermarket, you're happy to give maybe a $5 or $10 donation to somebody from World Vision to help those kids in Africa because it lets you sleep better at night. You're not as guilty that you're living this privileged life in New Zealand on the beach and having barbecues. But you wouldn't necessarily go to Africa, hold one of these sick kids in your hands, and actually feed them. But you feel better about yourself by giving $10 because you helped the kid, right? The same thing was used in COVID to make feel guilty. If you do not take the injection, grandma will die or somebody else will catch the vaccine. So again, you're right. It's fear. But then if that word doesn't work, add on an emotion on top of that, and which is guilt. And the people who don't feel fear, the guilt, people like us who put on our critical thinking hats, then you name and shame them. And you said those are the conspiracy theorists. You have to seclude them out and make them look like they're only the 5% nutbaggers because they're speaking the truth. Man, the whole thing is humanity can wake up tomorrow. If 90% woke up tomorrow, these guys won't have a chance to do what it is. But unfortunately, as I said again, going back to the fluoride, the glyphosate, the weather engineering, and the 5G combined, these people can't think for themselves. They're being programmed.
And that's what we're up against. And it may be that, some will never get there. And, strange things can happen when people are put in tough psychological circumstances. Which way do they go? Who do they blame? Do they blame the right people or the wrong people?
I think blame yourself. If I'm being honest, I've heard Catherine Austin Fitz once say, "We are the problem, mate." Can I be honest? We are the problem. 10 years back, I was the problem because I wanted to consume all of this, and I was in the whole banking system and the debt monetary system, and I wanted to keep up with the Joneses.
Well, you crazy logic. Like, I've heard this argument made before. If there weren't people who didn't get vaccinated, we would have been okay. I wouldn't have got COVID. Yeah, but you got the vaccine. Oh,
and you still got COVID maybe after that as well. So if you got the vaccine, you don't need somebody else to take the vaccine because you're protected, right?
and so what are you trying to tell me? It's my fault for not having any effect on you. That's
Paul, I've got insurance, but can you take insurance to make sure my insurance gets paid out?
yeah. Or you wear an adult nappy because the other guy's got a problem. I mean, but the reason I mention this is you can get some very illogical thinking around that. And when it comes to apportioning blame, you could single, I mean, I never took the jab, never took it, but maybe, it's my fault that I had to take it. How does that work? Well, I can't tell you, but that's, you got to be prepared to deal with the illogicality. Is that the word?
Yeah, but they don't have logic, man. Common sense is not that common. And when you put fear, again, when we said emotion, when there's fear, the frontal cortex or the human brain, which slows things down and actually critical thinking, does the critical thinking for us, it shuts down. So you can't think. Then you go into fight and flight, which is our human nature, where we were hunters and gatherers. Again, we're going down that path now. But that is why if you're in fear, if you're constant fear, and this is why there's something always going on. Have you noticed in the last 20, 25 years, there's a war going on somewhere or some problem somewhere, and life just isn't that easy anymore, supposedly, because the more they bombard us with this and you live in constant fear, not only do you fall sick, but your prefrontal cortex isn't working, which means you cannot think critically through a problem. And that's why it's easy. Just come home. What does the government say? What does the news say? Oh, this is what's happening. Okay.
Well, you just reminded me, I had an experience in a bar in Auckland, actually, once about 4 or 5 years ago. And that was when I was still reading news on network radio and RNZ. One of the main newsreaders there on all the time. And I was getting kind of disillusioned with it during that time because it was the COVID thing. And that was off the back also of not Reagan, of Trump's first term. So anyone who had not even sympathy, but thought that Trump was more than just a moron, where I worked, there wasn't looked upon too favorably. And then you added all the other stuff. I remember being in this bar one time, and it was at the time when people were, going out and getting their vaccinations. And there's a guy in the bar. He was saying, have you gone out? This guy Duncan, have you gone out and got your vaccine? No, I said, I'm not going to do that. Oh, so it's our responsibility to save you. He immediately said. And I said, no, I don't think that. It's just a choice. And then he said, I can't remember the exact line. Then he said this line, like this statement that he made to me, like with a lot of confidence, like he knew what he was talking about. And I recognized it. It was one of the lines I'd read out of a news bulletin. And then it occurred to me, I've done more thinking about that now because it's the power of words, right? It occurred to me that he thought of that. No, he didn't. He just heard it somewhere. And it was said with enough authority, and it was probably me, enough authority that he believed it. And I thought, I know that you didn't think of that. But he sort of appropriated it like he did. Now he could feel comfortable. See what people do? They don't actually ask themselves, is this true or not? Or anything. No. If it's said with enough authority, and repetition's important, and Goebbels taught us that, the resistance to non-belief could be hardly anything. Or to believe.
It's not even non-belief. Just stand up and ask why and who does it benefit, right? And the whole thing, as you said, is predictive programming already. There's movies and there's documentaries and stuff they've shown you before the fact. So that's when you see it, then you go, oh yeah, this could happen. A pandemic could happen. There were movies on pandemics before that, and COVID wasn't the first one, mate. They tried it with SARS and MERS, and those didn't kick off. So they had an event 201 saying, how do we make it happen this time where we can actually shut down the whole world, right? And that event 201 is where they kind of practiced it this time. And they said every media outlet is going to do it. And they got all the politicians on board that they will have to kick this in. That's why the SARS and the MERS didn't take off. They've tried this before. Yeah. Their plan is actually pushed back a little bit. But again, coming back to also the thing that you were saying, what puts people on a high horse is, firstly, they think they were right. They did the right thing. And by us questioning, maybe we were wrong or we were conspiracy theorists. A few years later, they realized that they were wrong or could have been wrong, but they still justify the decision saying, I had no choice. I've met people who said, I did it because of my grandmother, or I did it because of my children, or I did it. So now they're justifying that.
No, they say that's what they say. I had to do that. I had to do that. I always say, I pull them up, but I always think, no had.
No, they're giving up their sovereignty. They're giving up their sovereignty. They had to do it, which means what? I did not have the power. They do not have the power. I know people in New Zealand who have given up their jobs and lost their houses because they took a stand. Okay? It affected their finances, but I've helped them through those things and they're doing really well now. And you know what? They sleep better at night, knowing they had the power to say no, and they just said no, just say no. And the part that I'm coming at now also is because, and then when they know they were lied to, they do not want to admit it. And this is the stage where it doesn't matter whether they do the COVID inquiry in the UK or in New Zealand, it's all shambles. And I mentioned this when you interviewed me on Money Talks, at least a year and a half back. I said, a government, once wrong, will never, ever admit that they were wrong. Yes, they'll admit it 40 years back, 40 years later, and they will declassify the documents then because the generation's gone that can hold them accountable.
Oh, that's happened before. I know that. Well,
and you see in New Zealand, what happened with the inquiry into the COVID? Nothing. What happened in the UK? Nothing.
Well, we don't know yet, but they report back in February. But I mean, we can probably discern.
Come on, mate. If there was, if COVID was an inquiry, can I just tell you something? Do you think a politician cannot just have the 5 CEOs or the 10 CEOs of every New Zealand bank in a room and say, how do you create a loan? Do you think you can't you don't need to have a royal commission or any commission. How do you create money out of thin air? Just ask them. Simple. Keep it on the record. Let the whole country see it on live television. How do you create money out of thin air?
Going back to what I was saying before, when we get people in public thrashing it out so everyone can see, how are we going to, what's the best reset of the economy that we have? How can we make it work better? Is this guy, the air of the ideas is what is distilled down. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to do it. Apart from be authoritarian and just say, okay, we're doing it like this. We don't like it.
But it goes back to local barter. It'll have, the system is too top heavy and the system is going to crash. And people are going to have to literally live and build it out from the bottom up again. So it'll start at the barter level again. So whether you're gold or silver, or if I have sheep and you have carrots and kiwi fruit and all of that.
How many sheep for an air ticket?
I don't know, my friend. Air ticket. Why you want to escape New Zealand?
Yeah, I don't know, but there'll be limitations.
Some people have left certain countries already because they know how this is going to play out. And it's just unfortunate that happens. Some people are leaving New Zealand to go to Australia just for jobs. Some people are leaving countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and going to the Middle East. Because at least as much as they might say, oh, there's a dictator out there, or one family rules there,
at least they kind of leave you alone, right? Yeah, they kind of
leave you alone. And capital is respected. Millionaires are leaving China and the UK, and some of these Western, I don't want to even call them democracies anymore. It's just a facade. Western countries to go move their capital where it is respected most, right? So unfortunately, as I said, there's a shift coming. The next 6 to 7 years play out a certain way, and it's better be prepared rather than bury your head in the sand, because that ain't going to help anyone. And we need humanity to wake up, hopefully sooner rather than later.
On that, we're definitely on the same page. I want that to happen. It's been great chatting, Farzin. I don't think
it has, man. We're not going to let you go yet. We finish off for the audience with a few fun questions. So, sure. Paul, what's the funniest story you share with your friends when you're having a beer or something? Is there a happy, funny story for you?
I'll tell you two stories. The funniest thing that ever happened to me on air that I can remember. There'll be other ones, but this is what I can remember. I was doing a talkback radio show in Wellington on News Talk ZB, as it was. Was it then? It was News Talk ZB then. And a guy rang up, and it's like 10:30 in the morning, Monday or Tuesday morning. Quite a sizable audience. And the guy's got some really serious point to make. But he had this bird, like this budgie bird in the background that wouldn't shut up right next to the phone. And every time he went to make this sort of well thought out point, this bird would start screeching and making this weird noise, sounding like he was trying to talk, sound like the owner. And it was so funny that every time that I went to say so, I just cracked up. And I've still got the tape somewhere because someone made a tape of it. But that was so funny. So advice, folks, if you're ever going to try and get a serious moment, do not have the budgerigar or some small animal nearby squawking away. It takes away. The most difficult decision I've ever had to make, okay, in terms of the angst it gave me. I did a filming job in Australia for Ansett Airlines when they used to exist, and they no longer exist now. What were we doing? Okay, so they had a freight service go from Auckland to Sydney every evening. It was an old jet freighter. People know their aircraft type, 727, which hardly any of them are flying now. 3 engines, Boeing aircraft with a T-tail. And they were a big domestic airliner in the States, right through the 60s, 70s, 80s. Hundreds, thousands were made. This was a converted freighter operated by Kitty Hawk, which was an American company based somewhere in the south somewhere. And they had the contract for Ansett to provide the crews and the plane to fly their courier every night, right? So courier out of New Zealand and then back the other way. So we hitched a ride with these guys. So we got in. It was really cool. In a freighter, flew over the Tasman Sea, all up in the jump seat with the pilots, these American guys, real entertaining. We landed there, unloaded, went about our business. We'll see you in a week, we said, because we're going to ride back with them to Auckland when we finish the job. And we went all around Australia for the job. Anyway, as part of the equipment, those big old video cameras of the past were really big. You'll remember, you'd see news crews with them, and they were, in fact, that's one of the reasons my shoulder is droops at one side, because of carrying those things for too long. But anyway, and to power them, you had to have enormous batteries because they sucked the power. And if you wanted to be able to record for the full tape length, 30-minute Betacam, you had to have a big battery. The normal batteries that slid in the back, it'd be changing them every 2 or 3 minutes. So the cameraman who was with me is a real character. Ted, he'd built this battery belt out of motorcycle batteries, all in parallel, series or parallel thing, and then put them in a belt, and it looked like one of those sort of like, commando belts or Batman belts with these real beautiful leather slide-ins for the batteries, and then little holes underneath for the cables to come out and all click in. Anyway, there was a wiring block in that thing that he made, and the week before we went to do this trip, we're getting all the gear together, and I went and picked up this battery belt. I was driving home in the car, and the wiring block shorted out, and it caught fire. And it caught the vinyl in the back of the car on fire almost instantaneously. It was really freaky how quickly, and the car filled up with acrid smoke in a few seconds when I was driving to pull over, and opened the door, the smoke's going up. And of course, it's electrical fire. So in the end, I sort of managed to pull the wires apart, and it stopped the fire. So I thought, okay, that's good to know. So we joined up the wiring block again. And I thought I'd better keep an eye on that. Anyway, so we're getting on the plane at Sydney, and there's a curfew. So at 11 o'clock, the curfew comes down, and they don't close the airport because there might be an emergency that needs to come in. But if you take off after the curfew, you get fined, and it was 100,000 Australian dollars. So everybody's trying to get out before 11 o'clock. So you big long line of airliners trying to get out. South African Airlines going to Joburg and up to LA and everything. They're all frantically in about an hour window before 11 trying to get out. And of course, we're in this queue of airliners, and it's about, 8 minutes to 11 or something, and we're like 3 more to go in the queue. So we get off before 11. I think if you're in the queue, you're guaranteed to be able to depart. Anyway, now before we go on the plane, I said to this guy, Ted, so I noticed the wiring block was getting loose again, you see, from all the use. I said, mate, that gear goes with us because we can't have that in the hold of the airplane because of what happened to my car. Okay? And down in the underfloor hold of the airplane, there were a few pallet things, aviation sort of pallet things. It didn't actually have any cargo in there. It was all on the top floor, freight floor, the big floor. Well, it used to be a passenger jet. Now got a cargo cabin. And it was loose with all our other stuff down there. And we're taxiing out. I thought, I said, Ted, where's the belt? He said, I left it in the hold. Oh my God, it's a 3.5 hour flight to Auckland. I've seen when that happens. I know the thing's getting loose. It's all bunched in with all our other gear and bags and everything. I thought, what do I do? Do I say to the captain who's sitting right in front of me in his captain's seat, hey, mate, we got an issue because if we miss the curfew, we can't get out. And in the entirety of the overnight courier delivery from out of Sydney is not going to get to the destination. So I had this horrible dilemma. Do I go safety first and let him know, because he would have had to have pulled out of we had to done so. He couldn't have flown with it like that. It's too risky. I knew that. So I sat there and I thought, and then the plane two in front of us turns on the runway and goes. Then the next one, I thought, oh no. I thought, okay, I just won't say anything. Anyway, so we take off and, climb out over the Tasman. Suddenly we get hit all this turbulence, really shaking around, like clear air turbulence. All I can think of is this bloody thing down there jumping around and shorting out fire. And who would know what happened halfway over the Tasman Sea at 36,000 feet, 700 miles from any coast? I could tell you one of the most beautiful sights, most relieving sights I've ever seen is breaking out of the cloud, coming into Auckland Airport, and there's the runway about 5 miles ahead. But I can breathe. I can breathe. Yeah, and we landed, went in, and now it might not sound much now, but I have never had such a pressure on me to either, I guess, do the right thing
Yeah.
or not. And whenever I make a big decision now, I always think of that moment.
That was a younger, different time in your life as well. Would you have done that same thing again? Would you have done that same thing again now?
In the 30s, it's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so let's ask the next question. What's the one thing in your life, if you could do it again, you'd do differently?
Do differently. I'd have to honestly say, Farzin, I can't think of anything. I mean, there's a few little things along the way, but in terms of direction in life, don't know about you, but I was pretty young when I chose what I wanted to do. Okay, you could say as a career, but it's more than a career. I was fascinated with the whole communication thing, technology of it, and the entertainment that came from it, all those things. And for me, I chose well, so it's delivered. There's been a few things along the way that, bit of bad luck here, bit of bad luck there. Not everything works out all the time, but in the big picture, I don't want to sound smug or maybe something
No,
stupid.
no. It could be from a personal point of view.
I've had cancer and I've had quadruple heart bypass. So I've been on the slab, wondering if it's going to work out. So no, I'm quite happy and ending up doing what I'm doing at this age of life in my business, not in the mainstream.
And you are the mainstream now, because mainstream media's not only dying, it's getting ready to completely.
A lot of former colleagues of mine have, as we say, hung up the headphones ages ago. I haven't done that.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, everyone's got a purpose, and your purpose is maybe helping us fight the good fight and spread the word around, right? Hey, any books that you'd recommend to people?
I only read aviation books
Okay.
because I'm really interested in the whole history of it.
Yeah, name one. We might have pilots or.
Well, it's usually autobiographies. What's his name? The designer, Joe Sutter's autobiography. He was the chief designer of the 747. That's a brilliant story. That would make a fantastic movie. Eugene Cernan, Captain Eugene Cernan, who I met in person, spent an hour with him. And of course, he was the last man to walk on the moon. And he signed his book for me. So I've got that. And another, I'm just going through the aviation books because I listen to things now fast and I can't be bothered doing all the reading.
That's okay. It's just one real good recommendation.
Or Chuck Yeager's autobiography is really cool. I tell you what I've been watching lately, which I've really been enjoying, and that is history archives of Vietnam War combatants,
which was also begun on false pretenses. All wars were begun on false pretenses.
Full range of experiences in that war. It's a jungle war substantially, so that's interesting listening for me at the moment. And anything to do with, I'm fascinated with cosmology, and how reality works, all those things, like most people, I think. So anything, I'll listen to anything like that. Though I'm finding now, I hope it's not an arrogance. I see something going, I know enough about that. I don't know more about that. So I'll skip it. But but I do think I don't need to know much more about how this big picture is operating, because I think I know enough to not have to be always reminded of the subtleties of it, because I think I've got that now. In fact, I think most people like us, Farzin, find that we actually live our lives with that in mind now. It's kind of a few degrees more off the direction it used to be for me, slightly the other direction. So I'm always factoring all that thinking into anything I do now. It's one thing I've noticed.
Exactly. it's kind of created a reference for us anyways. And for me and my clients, obviously knowing where the next, how this plays out helps, because the minute something happens, you're like, I knew that that government would do that, or that government would do that, or stuff like that. So then it just becomes very easy to read the playbook. And especially, as I said, if you know they're going to take us north, then why are you going to do something else, right? Stay away from the north as much as you can, explore the directions. It's just a stupid example I gave, but you get the gist of it. Hey, any, obviously, just one more question before my last question. Connecting the dots, what is the one or couple of dots you'd like anyone who's listening to this conversation connect from this conversation today?
I think it comes down to almost a binary thing in the end, and I haven't been able to escape this, and that is good versus evil. And I think in the end, 80,000-foot view, even more, that's what you're looking at. So I'm interested in the ultimate forces behind that. And if I can sense that, I think I'll be getting somewhere. Many people have got opinions on how far out you have to zoom to see that. But I think in the end, it is about that. It's kind of binary in the end. Which side are you on? Whose side is anyone on? You know, I think people need to decide.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Paul. And
A lot will come from that.
a lot will come from that. And educate yourself. As I said, my guest who's written that 180 degrees, once you read that, you'll understand a lot that you've been told was all a lie. So obviously, we'll let people watch that interview as well. Hey, just finish off with the same question with every one of my guests. Obviously, I've got a consultancy called Success Simplified. So how does Paul define success?
In a humble way.
Yeah.
There's always someone better than you or can do that thing better than you or whatever. Success for me, I mean, you do have to have a bit of money. It makes it easier. But I've had some things I wanted to do, and they're not about gathering wealth for the sake of it. I want to do stuff. Getting back to what I said before, it's on us to, if we can, keep the continuity going. I mean, it was delivered to us, and we've got to pass it on. So, I've got things like I'm associated with a museum down here, and we collect artifacts of old aircraft and bits and pieces. Now, that might be boring as hell to some people, but there's something about getting something that you remember you haven't seen for ages, like a particular model of car, that you remember when you were a kid. And now I'm looking at a beautiful example of it right in front of me, just as I used to remember it. Even better, there's more I'm noticing now. Those things are real highlights for me. I feel really good about things like that. And then, on the other side, are my offspring, have I equipped them or done my bit to equip them to operate with as much awareness as possible in the world? Now, I don't know the answer to that in the end. If they came up to my level of if I'd be satisfied if I could see that at least did something there. And so I don't care about the money. I won't go. I'm not interested in owning a house anymore or anything like that. They actually mean virtually nothing to me now. I mean, it's nice to have a comfortable place to live in, but they're transitory these days. You can move from one to the other. And as long as I'm useful in what I do with the RCR thing, and that's about as useful in my space as you can get in a country like this, the way I see it. As long as I'm useful, I'm happy to take that role or fill a gap or be with other people that fill the gap. But I also understand that if that usefulness runs out, well, that might be a time to, go full on with the hobby or or you know, I'm okay with walking away from media. I'm okay. I've done it. There's nothing much more to do. I don't need the ego massaged anymore. I'm not interested in updating again to a whole new technology platform. I've done, everything from magnetic tape through to, voice activated AI stuff, which we're working with these days. So, yeah, so I'm okay with that evaporating away after the usefulness is gone. So, yeah, just meaningful. Meaningful is what it's all about, Farzin. Has it been meaning? Does it mean anything? Is it meaningful?
Has your life had meaning? Yeah. And that is it. And this is the thing, the reason I ask Success Simplified and what success means to you, it has nothing to do with money, mate. Success is an internal thing. Just being a good father or good mother at the end of the day might just mean success to you. Or as you said, just passing on certain artifacts to the next generation, or you doing what you do on the radio and interviewing people in such a fashion that the audience enjoys listening to you and your guests. And could be anything. Success is very individual, and that's why I just ask every guest, what does success mean to them? Doesn't have anything to do with the monetary side of things at all.
I mean, in interviews, like even when we do our chats on RCR, I mean, we know each other, so it's quite personable. But okay, you're looking across, you're seeing me. Actually, you're looking across, you're seeing our entire audience. I'm just here to ask them what they can't directly ask you right now. Hopefully, I can think of, like they do, that it covers the thing off. So, so I don't even see myself as the person there. I'm a representative of a whole lot of people, and I just am the one with the opportunity to ask right now. Not everyone gets that opportunity as consistently as I do.
Yeah. Same thing, and just one last bit in there. That's what people do with elections, right? You elect someone to represent you, and that one person is the one who's then supposed to make decisions based on your vote for the betterment of the country. But the exact opposite thing happens. It's unfortunate, but it will change.
I don't know what would happen to a person like me who got in that system. Would I turn into one of them? I would hope not. Or would it be so
First of all, it attracts megalomaniacs, as I said, it's sociopaths. The second thing is, yes, anyone can be corrupted. And again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but if you can't be corrupted, that's why you have the Epstein kind of events in the USA, okay? You are kind of then blackmailed because somebody has a picture or video of you doing something, and then you have to, even if you did not. You're a good person when you entered politics. You wanted to do the right thing, but then you've been compromised. So um, people don't know half the stuff that is really going on out there, mate. Doesn't matter. Hopefully, people can read more books. I actually hope the internet goes down so people will stop consuming Netflix, and hopefully, people have books at home beforehand. So when something like this happens, you can sit and read books, and you won't be completely bored out of your mind. And you'll have something better to do, and maybe they'll spend time with their family and kids.
an hour and a half, 2 hours a day going for now it's a bit of an older man's jog now. I used to do a lot of
Just get out in nature, mate. Just get out in nature. And in New Zealand, we're so lucky.
even just the sun on me now is a beautiful thing.
Exactly. As we get older, we appreciate the little things in life.
It could be a highlight of the day for me. Seriously, I'm just getting some sunlight on me, just the way it feels.
You know how I said God's given us all the same 24 hours? The same thing I say, the best things in life are free. You just walk out, you get sunlight. You have friends, a hug from a family member, or a kiss on the cheek by your kid.
Or a beautiful
All of these
view.
are free. You don't need money. You don't need to have a house in Mission Bay to enjoy these kind of things, or $1 million, $2 million in your bank account.
I need to be in the Coro Club, and I need to be able to walk up next to some wealthy person when I'm getting my sausage rolls.
Yeah.
What do I do? I don't know. I don't go in for that. So.
Hey, mate, Paul, I just want to say thank you for your time. You've been pretty gracious with your time. Is there anything else in the end? Where can our audience find out more about you? Obviously, I'll put a link for the RCR.
You can go look at Bring Our Birds Home, my charity, which covers the aircraft.
I'll get a link for that, and I'll put that in there as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good story there.
Any social media?
Say again?
Any other social media for yourself?
I've got a Facebook page, but I only put links to songs up.
Okay.
That's all I do. I choose not to say much in public. I mean, what I say comes through the work. I can't be bothered, sort of doing these things fairly. I've got a great computer here. I've got a lovely flight simulator programming here. If I want to just kick back and do something, that's what I'm doing. I'm a gamer. I guess is what you'd say if I wasn't. So I would say to everybody, find the meaning. I can't believe I'm saying this now. I would have said this a few years ago. I try not to be too hard on people because I kind of understand the position many people have been put in. And while I'm tempted to say, gosh, you're weak-minded, you deserve what you get, I do have, I like the word empathy because that's been misused by certain political leaders here over the time. But I do, and feeling sorry sounds a bit pathetic, but I do have sympathy. And I kind of in a way do feel their pain in a way. But that doesn't hide you from reality in the end. The truth matters. So hopefully, truth has really got to stay the most important thing, I think.
The truth wins in the end anyway. So, Matt, I just want to say thank you for your time. And it was a pleasure having you. We'll definitely have you at some stage down the track when there's maybe a lot more evolved in the world.
Significant event that I might be qualified.
Yeah.
Comment
significant event. I'm sure you'll be calling me to jump on your Money Talk as soon as a significant event happens, but definitely
we're due for another chat probably in a few more weeks. So I look forward to that.
No worries.
No, interesting. It's been great chatting. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Pleasure's all mine, mate. Thanks, Paul.